Okay, so where does this come from and how are we doing it? So some of this is the thing I described at the front end, which is the fall balancing FTE for grades 1 through 12, which is 9 FTE, and the fall balancing FTE for kindergartners, which are 9 FTE. So these FTE were already in the budget and planned to hit schools. This is the timing of when they would be put into schools, which is now rather than fall. The impact of that is that schools that have been under projected may need more FTE in the fall, and it may require that we take FTE from schools whose enrollment has been over projected, and or it may require the use of reserves. So I may come back in the first budget amendment and say, you know, whatever the challenges are, here's where we have kindergartens that I want to come back and say, you know, so those are possibilities on this one. If in fact our whole system draws more students into it, then dollars follow those kids and we can staff for them. So this is really the play between schools and if people show up in a different place than where we project. Next possible change is that the high school directed support FTE, which was previously in the school-wide support table, so this is the 14, and the 25% of discretionary support in the school-wide support table that's redirected to teaching. The impact on these, greater burden on administrators within high schools to perform test coordination, data entry for essential skills and similar tasks, and may result in the loss of instructional specialists to support essential skills, which I will say this is something we lost with Title IIA funds, and it was one of the things that was called out as a high investment strategy, high leverage strategy. So not without trade-off here that we're saying, okay, we're shifting this to teaching support. And I'm going to say that's true of just about everything. You will feel that, and you should, on every single one of the items that we're saying we're pulling away and directing to.
Superintendent,
yeah.
You know, with this redirection, we had heard that part of our shift, or the part of the recommended shift, was that the way it played out on the ground is people had been converting teaching FTE into some of the support roles. With this new change back to teaching FTE, will they not be allowed at this point to convert it back into admin support roles?
So the point of this is to be able to offer kids, I mean, this is where we're placing the value on student access to courses. It is not, you can also make an equally strong argument of the things that support the ability, you know, what's supporting the work in the classroom, and a number of the things that are around instructional specialists that build the capacity of your whole staff, essential skills. I mean, you've got a ton of data. You've got a ton of other tasks that actually support teachers being able to do what they do when they're in the classroom. And if we were to ask individual principals, is this the thing you'd pick? It's your highest leverage strategy. You may get different answers. So, but what the value is on this one is pushing all of our capacity into teaching so that we're able to have students have access to classes. Yeah.
So we are imagining restricting this, saying you cannot convert it back to...
Yeah, you can't, because I'm going to have to come get it in the fall.
Right.
You know, if you then direct it to something else, I may need it in the fall in order to go offset where the enrollment shifts. So it's literally the framework that we'd be using for how we're staffing. Yeah. And you can easily find another use for every amount of FTE we do. Everybody's got such high demand and high need. You hear it in, I mean, you will just hear it in every voice you've heard tonight. You hear what people don't have.
That's why I asked.
I know.
That it would be
you hear
used.
it. That's just where we are. So, okay. So the other reductions from the initial budget proposal. We had proposed an additional FTE to expedite volunteer background checks, which we just have two things. One, a significant backlog of volunteer background checks, and a planned increase of looking at volunteers for our third grade reading campaign. We would reduce that FTE add to half-time rather than full-time, which may mean we scale back that campaign and that we are not able to alleviate some of the backlog. Second one, we had talked about the expanding what was our new teacher peer mentoring and coaching support to now extend to a broader group of teachers. We would reduce that significantly, the capacity to do that significantly, but that was a new model that we then are really postponing or not building on. We had proposed to expand our online learning capacity by 3 FTE, so we had proposed to add a highly qualified special ed, ELL, and math teacher this year for online blended learning. We would not expand. There was an IT project manager being added because we are doing the conversion to from ESIS to Synergy, and this was in order to maintain the capacity to support instructional programs while we are doing that conversion. So we'll reduce that add from a full-time to a half-time.
So real quick,
Yeah.
Superintendent, the slide behind, I just want to point out that the online learning, that impact, that's another one of those high yield investments, right? I mean, particularly for students who are in credit recovery.
Correct. Yes. And it's not getting rid of the capacity altogether. We're just not expanding it. So we've had a multi-year, how are we continuing to build that capacity? This would mean we're not continuing to build it this year. We're holding steady where we are. But yeah,
Okay.
but yes,
I
and
just
right
wanted
now
to point that out because that's something that I know the board has been talking about.
Yes.
How do we expand that?
And it's been targeting credit recovery specifically.
Yeah.
And the third grade reading, too, had great promise, that being such a key
Mhm.
piece. And this is probably a really stupid question, but couldn't there be, like, a volunteer who's vetted who then is able to vet the volunteers?
I will encourage any and all creative strategies to fill these gaps.
Okay,
So
just-
there you go.
that's-
Yeah.
I think there can be.
Okay, just
Could be. I'm serious.
something that is really exciting that could be huge.
And I will say, truly, I would encourage strategies to figure out how we fill these gaps, because the demand for what we're talking about here is really trying to meet what were our strategies for the coming year. So yeah, we'll look for. Okay, so the emergency management, we had budgeted for a full-time emergency management coordinator that was coming at the end of our 2-year federal grant to build our emergency management capacity. We've reduced that to half-time, and this person. Part of what their job has been is to do training for all of our schools, do vulnerability assessments, do emergency management plans for each school. The continuation of a coordinator is to continue our training capacity as we have new staff and make sure we can implement the plans that we've put in place. So we've not eliminated it, but reduced it to half-time. Hearings officer, we talked in the original budget about adding a district-wide hearings officer to increase the consistency of our disciplinary hearings, and this one was a key strategy around our disproportionate discipline and just getting consistency across the district. So this one, again, we've gone from full-time to half-time. K-3 literacy adoption, we had planned for this year that we will delay, which also has an impact on the third grade reading campaign. And then there's a section here that is like fractional reductions to numbers of things. So an IT contract, textbook, and warehouse support that will equate to a couple of FTE. And so that's essentially where we would be pulling from in order to get to our redirected FTE.